unless you live in the moment. Know thyself also means being in the still present, totally experiencing our present moment. That is how we reach greater enlightenment. Because if you are caught in this, nothing else is entering you except your brain, which is like an automatic pilot. But you have a mind. The brain is just a mechanism. And the subconscious is running. But when you allow your mind to come in here, your higher boo-boo, then you get input from a higher source and a higher viewpoint and greater wisdom.
Welcome to a Broaderlands podcast. The opinions expressed on Broaderlands podcast are those of the guest speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of the host or Broaderlands podcast. Dr. Stephen Ross, welcome to Broaderlands podcast.
Thank you very much, Boo Boo. It's a pleasure to be here.
And I had to bring up doctor because I would love for you to share the story. And I know you like to be called Steve. You don't like that term. So I'd love for you to touch on the story of how you became a doctor.
Yes, I did have a regular bachelor's degree in finance. When I used to do early radio shows when I first started about 50 years ago, I would end up not being told I was on debates with doctors. The radio show host, I assumed I was going to be on there by myself, and I found out it was someone from the AMA or the medical group. And when I got to a point when I would supply information that the other guests couldn't answer, they would go, "Are you a doctor?" And I would have to say no. So I decided I've got to end this because these people were getting off the hook. And so I go back and I get my Ph.D. In business. Now, the next time I did a program where a medical professional couldn't answer, and they said, "Are you a doctor?" And I go, "Yes, I am." Now, they never asked a doctor in what, but I really felt good because they were afraid to pursue that, because what if I had received my PhD at a bigger hospital than they did, or whoever it was? So that is the only reason that I got that title. But I'm Steve, I'm Stephen. When I used to compete in sports in my university, they'd always say, "Ross, do this." So whoever calls me, as long as they're not throwing tomatoes, I'm going to respond to them.
Yeah, thank you. I thought I had to throw that in right from the beginning because I thought that was
absolutely yes. It's just regular Steve.
And you've debated with a number of doctors over the years, huh?
I have. Not really me personally desiring to do that. But as I mentioned, when I started, I've been doing this now 52 years. And when I first started, holistic alternative medicine was still kind of a no-no, and people were putting it down, even though I must say, over the years, the population has got more and more involved with complementary alternative medicine because standard medicine is not always working. And so in my World Research Foundation Advisory Board, believe it or not, I had the chairman of the Nobel Assembly, the head physician for NASA's space programs, and very prestigious individuals. So somebody wouldn't say, "Hey, your organization is just alternative medicine and you don't know anything about regular medicine." But there was still a stigma. And I would do these radio shows, and all of a sudden the host would say, "Oh, yes, we've got Stephen Ross here, but we also have Dr. So-and-so," or, and I would never be told in advance. And as we would talk, eventually the other individual would have a problem because you can see on the background here, we have thousands and thousands of books, not just on medicine, but philosophy dating to 1492. And at that time, I had access to computerized data, so I could be on a show and pop up information and statistics instantly. There was no somebody said this, I'd be able to say, well, at Harvard, they reported this, and the other doctor would just sink until they said that magical phrase, are you a doctor? And boom, I just have to say, I felt so good. And I was never challenged back. Well, where did you go to school? Or what are you a doctor in? They should only know I was a doctor in finance, but
That's funny. I always say I got my Ph.D. in 2009. I was a pitiful, hopeless drunk. And I had my awakening, and I started to have a lot of mysticism come to me. But never went to school, but I've learned a lot about mysticism and the great mystics, and really learning how to love myself so I can love others. I remember telling Neil Donald Walsh, the problem with love thy neighbor as thyself is most people don't love themselves anymore. And that's what the mystics taught me, to love myself again. And when you can love yourself, you can love others as you love yourself.
and that is so important. And no matter what I share in our time together, what you just shared is really the most important. If we do not love, or even let's add this, if we don't trust ourselves, if we always give our power away to somebody else, to somebody who we believe knows more or has a better background, it's not that I discount that. I will think about it, but we always have to trust ourselves whether something feels right to us, and we want to pursue that. There's so often people will come to me and ask questions. Sometimes I've had women come up and say, should I have had my breast removed? And it's like, it doesn't matter what I answer, you've already done that. And when I ask why, a lot of times these women were told as a preventive. They didn't even have a problem yet. So I always advise to get second opinions, but always look to trust yourself. So you've already given the highlight of our interview by saying you have to love yourself.
One of the most powerful things I've heard you say is healers don't heal people, people heal themselves. And I love that.
It is again, doing this as long as I have 50 some years. I've done a lot of healing work or been involved with that, but here's my feeling. The best healers are the ones who provide the environment so the person heals themselves. When somebody feels so comfortable and believes that in this environment they're going to be healed, they will be healed. I go back to the biblical passage. In his own hometown, he could do no mighty miracles. Well, why not? Why could he not? Because he grew up in that town. And Jesus, people maybe saw him in a slightly different light growing up. So we must remember that we're conduits, or this is my belief. And by the way, may I kind of preface something with a little story, Boo-Boo? Would it be all right?
Sure.
Aristotle was walking along the Mediterranean, and in the distance he saw a man with a bucket. And the man was taking water out of the Mediterranean and pouring it into a hole. And when Aristotle got up to him, he goes, "What are you doing?" And the man said, "I'm going to empty all of that water into the hole so I can see that beautiful blue-green bottom." And Aristotle says to him, "Now, how are you going to get all of that water into that little hole?" And the man scratched his head and said, "Great philosopher, what are you doing today?" I am contemplating the universe. And the man says, how are you going to get all that into that little head of yours? The idea is maybe I'm the madman, maybe I'm Aristotle. So people should always take everything that's shared. How does it feel? How does it ring for you? So I just wanted to put that in, that obviously things that I share are from my opinion and my experience.
That, thank you. I'd love for you to share a little bit about your upbringing and your journey, the path that led you to your present work, and how you manifested the library of wisdom. And like you said, I've heard you share that it had over 20,000 books, and dating back to the 1400s. And I would love for you to touch on Manly Peace, your connection with Manly P. Hall, of course.
Yes. Well, my background, especially when I compare it to most people that I've counseled with, I came from a Leave It to Beaver family. Honestly, I had a brother, and it was truly a Leave It to Beaver family. I remember at 13, I asked my parents, what religion are we? And they said, well, what religion do you want to be? And I go, well, I don't know. So they picked up a book on various religions, and they said, look, if you can prove to us what you would like to be, what you would like to follow, and it makes sense, you are free to do that. And so you could go with neighbors or anybody and experience. And then at another time, 17 years old, I said, what political party are we? And they go, well, who would you vote for? And I go, well, I don't know. Here are the candidates. Whoever you resonate with, Republican, Democrat, or whatever, that's who you would be. So I didn't have to unlearn or forget things. And so I merely went around in my life. I have a sports background, and I sustained a knee injury and was sent to the sports physician for the Rams, Dodgers, and Lakers, who said, you'll have to have surgery or you can't compete again. And I was very dejected, went back to my trainer's room, and there's a Popular Mechanics magazine, has nothing to do with medicine. I read about a technique in Europe, and this was 1968, and Dr. Kurland, this physician, said, that'll never work. That's holistic garbage. That's not going to work. Well, I used it myself, missed 4 weeks of training, and that year ended up placing fifth in the Nationals and becoming an All-American. So it planted a seed. What other health things exist in this world that we're not told about? And so I went around the world making health contacts. 3 years later, I met a Native American who tells me all my future guidance will be in dreams. And I remember thinking, dreams? I don't remember my dreams. Sometimes they're silly. But after 1 week, I had a dream, and I have been guided through my dreams for the last 60 years, bringing me to different places. My dreams have told me about philosophers. I've got a lot of guidance. And so what you see in the library is an amalgamation of two streams: the stream of natural alternative medicine and esoteric spirituality, dreams, alchemy, and metaphysics. And so that has been my guiding light. I believe very strongly that all of us have guidance around us. I am spiritual but not religious. I love all religions and philosophies, but I truly believe there is no greater guru than the higher boo-boo. Now that's for you personally, and the higher Steve, and the higher everybody in your audience. We have a guiding mechanism that is with us all the time, that we don't necessarily need gurus and other people, or even to read 20,000 books. We need to have a beautiful heart, an open mind, and a humble spirit. And all information comes to us.
Of that. And I think there's a biblical saying where, and I'm paraphrasing, where someone touches Jesus and they were healed, and he said, it wasn't me, it was through your faith.
That is it. That he felt the vibration. He wasn't upset, but he felt the vibration. And to me, that's what it's all about. Everything really has to do with the environment we place ourselves in. And there was a great healer in the 1800s that said, thought is like the aroma of a rose. You don't see the aroma, but you sense it. And you must realize that all the people around us, everything in our environment has an influence on us. And that influence really dictates who we are and how we progress. And if our people around us are of a certain ilk, that's how we're going to be. And if they're of another philosophy or mindset, that also may be how we end up. But if we're in an environment where you think or one thinks they're going to heal, they will heal, because we are, how do we say that? We are influenced so much by our belief systems. And if our belief is that this is going to work for us, or if this person tapping us, or if we read this book, or if we have this medallion, so shall it be, in my opinion.
That, what do you see the key difference between knowledge and wisdom, and how would you define what the ancients called gnosis?
For me, knowledge is the accumulation of facts and information. And we definitely have this in the picture behind me, men and women who have written information. For me, wisdom is a little bit higher position. We can say that there is something called relative truths and absolute truth. And relative truths are things that happen relative to our situation. It may not happen all the time, but wisdom does happen all the time. Absolute truth or total wisdom is going to hold true in any kind of situation. And the gnosis is a higher wisdom that permeates all existence. It's interesting because people will come to me and say, have you read this book? And I'll say, well, was the author born after 1925? And they'll go, well, yes, they're recent. I go, no, I haven't. I dwell in the ancient times because I have found that information and the people that we still know from thousands of years ago, if they are still around and their precepts work, that is really sound. But boo-boo, today we have people who come out with a book. This is the greatest thing since sliced bread. And 3 years from now, not only may we not hear about them, but they've taken a nosedive or they haven't lived their philosophy. That is knowledge. Somebody has temporary knowledge. Wisdom is part of the golden chain of philosophers. And that golden chain are these individuals who have restated truths without adding their little tidbits to it. And thus we get into a Manly P. Hall, a wonderfully beautiful philosopher who has passed away now. But at one time he had more books in print than any other living author. But when you read his materials about past times or individuals, it's as if he was right there with them, stating their precepts. And how I would contrast this is, when I was in LA back, my gosh, 50 years ago, people were going, well, our church doesn't believe women should wear makeup because this and that, and people add their own little theories or tidbits to something. And then you have the pure, clean teachings coming from the great founts of wisdom from the cosmos that other individuals have apprehended. And whether there's 200 or 500 years between these great philosopher teachers, women and men, when they restate it again, it is pure, beautiful teachings. And Manly Hall epitomized that. His philosophical research society, his beautiful library of materials, his writings, and of course, his greatest book, The Secret Teachings of All Ages and Times, encapsulates just all information on religions, philosophy, symbols, just very, very beautiful.
That I also love his book, The Secret Destiny of America.
Yes.
And then he says something interesting for me. He says the Greeks were well aware of the American continent before the Christian era, which means before Columbus.
I would agree with that because, again, we have 20,000 books here and then another 35,000 PDFs going back to 1240, believe it or not, even before the printing press, where there were just books. And there is quite a bit of evidence that the ancients were well aware of this. And I just read that a parchment was uncovered, I think in Egypt, which actually showed North and South America thousands and thousands of years ago. And this just appeared like 3 days ago. So somebody can Google. And when you see this, it's like, you got to be kidding. It is. It was buried so they know the time period. And it shows basically North and South America. So the history is not always accurate as we're told. But yes, the individuals, and you have to remember too, in those days, we had people, those Greeks, whose intuition and intellect were very profound, and they could leave the body and they could travel all over this planet. And for the people who may not be familiar with out-of-body experiences or some of these aspects of mysticism, they are real. Ancients and even current people are able to do these things, and they saw. And so, yes, I agree with you. The destiny was known. Now, whether we are fulfilling it to its highest and best, whether we're regressing, that remains to be seen right now. But the wise members of humanity have known many, many things thousands and thousands of years ago. And just because we have fast cars and fast computers doesn't mean we know everything, and they didn't.
And, it's funny you brought up Egypt, ancient Kemet. If the Greeks knew about this, the ancient Egypt had to know about it. Like, it
Absolutely.
seems like, because they got a lot from ancient Egypt.
Yes.
And why did they get wiped away from history, Egypt? And it always goes, we're taught in schools about the Greeks and the Romans.
Well, it's going to get us kind of a little bit more into politics, but again, the great civilizations have come and gone. And even though when we look historically, we may see that one culture went over and dominated, but I will guarantee you, always things were happening from within. And when they happened from within, and you have to remember, here was Egypt. Here's the difference between Greece and Egypt. In Egypt, only the royalty had access to the inner chambers and the priests. But in Greece, you could go to the quad and set yourself in front of 4 different philosophers and say, you know what, I think I'm going to listen to Socrates today. I think I'm going to listen to Plato. I think I'm going to listen to whoever it is. There was more intellect of even the people who were not in high standing in that culture. But in Egypt, it was like, nope, it's sacred. And the mystery schools were more prevalent in Egypt. And in Greece, these philosophers were basically giving the teachings that were in the old mystery schools that were so very, very secret. And eventually, again, the civilizations come and go, but they usually eat themselves up from inside first, and then it's like a puffball. And when invaders come, there's no substance. That is my opinion, historically or hysterically, looking throughout time.
I know, was it James Price? Am I saying that right? That Manly Pete brings up in his book on the Americas, and he said that the god Quetzalcoatl was known in Peru as Amaru. From the latter comes from the word America, Amaruca, translated as the land of the serpents, plumed serpent, which is interesting. Do you think there's a connection there with the word America?
That's a very, very good question. I would say that I am not proficient enough to really answer that. However, I will say that the more I've been hearing about the interconnection of cultures, uh, learning about tunnel systems that go from one area to another, that truly they are discovering. There was a tunnel system that was found in the Grand Canyon, I think like around 1912, or I don't have that date, but I do have the information that when it was entered, there was Egyptian statues, there was Buddhist things in there in Arizona. And then when you look at the countries in South America, there is such a contact. So I really believe that these cultures did know about each other and information, because especially when you look at different diagrams or rock paintings or um, even in their parchments and scrolls, there are so much similarities between cultures that on the surface, really, there's no history that they have contact. But how are they sitting with exactly the same cuneiform writings or images? So every day we discover more. And now with these satellite pictures, they go, oh my gosh, he just found a whole city under the plants or under the ice and snow in Antarctica. And didn't Edgar Casey say that eventually in the Sphinx, in the underground, they will find all kinds of tablets and information? So even though we think we know everything and we can peer thousands of light years, we don't really even know about ourselves on this planet. Really, if we really are serious about it, all of a sudden they found, oh my God, we found another Egyptian period. It's like, okay, so the deeper they dig, the more they find. It was Emerson that said, when I find narrow viewpoints, I find narrow reading, and let's expand it. I'm only going to talk about what I'm familiar with. And as soon as something new comes in, I got to go, uh-oh, there was another culture, there was another civilization, there was another king or queen. We know very little, not only about our world, but now I'm going to put a little extra spin on our conversation here. We can't wait to go to the heavens and discover what's there, what formed the world. We dive deep into the oceans. But you ask a man why he still beats his wife, or why somebody gets the different habits that they have, they don't want to look at that. It's always easier to look outside. It's always easier to accept things that are there. And now with AI coming in, and I did a show on Gaia and AI. I actually had people in the library who are putting together. It's unbelievably great for indexing and coming up. Why I hesitate a little is the more we look outside, the more we depend on other things, the less we're understanding just how incredible Boo Boo is, how much he can do, how much is there, access, your abilities and talents. The more we continue to look outside rather than following the admonition on the temple walls. There were three admonitions of the ancient Greeks: know thyself, know thyself, know thyself.
Love that.
Am I coming across too much as a preacher for you?
No, I love it.
Okay.
I love soaking in your insights. So thank you. I really appreciate it. Going back to the land of the plumed serpent, Ohio, Serpent Mount, like it makes
Yes,
sense, right?
I've heard about that. Yes, you wonder. I am not sure that they've really dug into those, have they? Or
I don't know, to be honest. It's a good question. But I do know it's like 4 football fields long if you were to straighten out the serpent, and it aligns perfect with the sun, at a certain period of time.
and you've got to look and go, okay, so what wise culture have they missed that might have done that? And that's why I love shows that on our TV where they uncover something new. Now, some people go, "Oh boy, how are we going to explain this, or how do we fit it into our very neat timelines?" And I look at that, and it just continues to amaze me that so much is still being uncovered. This is 2025. I mean, think about it. And all of a sudden, they're making these incredible discoveries. And science, who quote is the God for a lot of people, is changing every other week. And thank God now they just don't have books so they can go, oh my gosh, we have to redo our theory now because this happens and that happens. And we discovered this isn't the bottom line. Everything is changing. And it just may be because we're changing. We're changing in our awareness of wanting to know more. And in wanting to know more, we discover more.
That, and going back, people may think we're crazy, but in Ecuador, for an example, they find the same sculptures or as the Sumerian stuff. You'll see the pine cone, or you'll see the handbags, that handbag in Mexico, the same
Yes.
handbag in ancient Sumer. It's like, okay, what's in the handbag? How is this all almost identical? Those handbags, or the Olmec people having the handbags. Like,
No,
it's
you're
very
right.
interesting. There's a
You're
huge
right.
connection.
But you see, if I think about that too much, see, I don't have any follicles left to blow out of my head. I can only contain so much in there. And no, you're exactly right. Obviously, since they didn't have television and the internet in those days, how do they have exactly the same things? Either a group introduced all of them, or people in each group were intuitive and they all tuned in. That is going to maybe someday be discovered, but people would be shocked. I am not, because I'm a glorified librarian, of how many cultures have the same basic ancient information that is so close. You can't say it kind of feels the same. No, they are the same. The images are the same. It's very, very curious.
You brought up know thyself, and I was just thinking, like, if we're multi-dimensional beings, know thyself is such a deep, profound, more broader meaning. It's really deeper than I could even imagine. know thyself. But that's a powerful statement.
No, it is a powerful statement, and in those ancient temple mystery schools, this is what they did with the individual to bring them. And earlier we started a conversation with environment, the environment you're in. So if you are in an environment which allows your higher self to become prominent with you where you can retain it, then you see the multi dimensions, the multi universe. There's a whole thing about we are living parallel lives simultaneously. There is whole groups, and I have looked into this, that we are living our past lives as you and I are speaking. We are so used to thinking this is how everything goes. It goes like this, but it may not. It may not be like that. There may be simultaneous situations taking place. And so the deeper one pursues this, you may lose hair, but not necessarily. I don't want people to think if you go following what you and I are talking about, you lose all your hair. But you do continue to have a different perspective on your own life and how you treat people and how you look at people, because you recognize as you go deeper that everything is virtually one. And it was Paracelsus who laid it out in 1510. We are made up of the same substance as the stars. We are made up of the same substances of the plants and animals. It's all the same substances.
I love that. I just had I was watching The Walking Dead. It's an little older episode series, not that long ago though. But I was watching it. I watched the end of the episode, and I got teary eyed. I felt a deep sense of our interconnection with each other, our shared humanity and beyond. And I was in this, like, my whole being was like glowing inside for like an hour and a half, and it wore down like probably by midnight. But I could feel like our I felt so connected to everything, to the all. And I've had a number of these experiences where we're all connected. We're so much deeper than these spacesuits and all this hatred and discrimination, and you're illegal and you're not, or the flags, or just the tattoos, or whatever. We're so much deeper than that. Rumi said it beautiful. He says, why not, instead of focusing on the Muslim, the Christian, or the Jew, why not focus on the same light that's shared within? And I was in that state for quite some time, and it was just such a beautiful, profound, beyond words experience.
Yeah, I mean, Rumi in the poetry, it was Plato who said, be a citizen of the world. And if you're a citizen of the world, you can go into any country, you can be into any religious institution, and know that is very, very beautifully said. It's very important.
Thank you. Why were the mystics, like, they were so much ahead of their time in a way where they can go beyond the belief systems and the conditioned thinking of the collective, and they were known as seers?
I could approach that question in multiple ways. I would say that my viewpoint, and the ancients have said, the earth is a schoolroom. And in this schoolroom, we're here to make experiences to demonstrate our awareness. And if we want to look, and I've been out of this a long time, but my elementary school was first grade through sixth grade, and then junior high was 7 through 9. In a schoolroom, you can have first and second graders, and you can have sixth graders ready to graduate. And where would they graduate to? To a different realm that is less material or physical than the earth. That's why there's other planets and stars. It isn't just here. So you can have somebody who is a fifth or sixth or an eighth or ninth grader, where the other ones are 7, And because of their experiences, they have learned, they have apprehended. And because of that, they would seem quite different than the people who have just come into this reality. Now, how can we maybe look deeper at this? Well, why are there people who in our earth here, they don't care. They could kill another human being like this. They could deface things. They could crush and kill. It just doesn't bother them. And then on the same world, Boo Boo, we have someone that goes, "Ooh, there's an ant there. I am not going to end that ant's life. I am not going to hurt the spider." Why is there such a wide disparity between viewpoints? Now, I don't ascribe to the Christian concept, one life and you're done and you sit next to Jesus and God. Otherwise, there's men, there's women, there's cultures. Why am I born in LA and live in Sedona and someone drinks out of the Ganges River their whole life? It doesn't work one shot. We are constantly learning. And so to answer your question from that viewpoint, you have advanced beings who have gone through first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth grade, and now they have developed within themselves why they're here in the schoolroom. They are able to see. They are able to help their fellow beings because they don't just use these eyes. They use higher senses. And there are no miracles on this earth plane. There is only laws that have not been recognized. And because of that, individuals who do things, quote, that seem unbelievable or mysterious, we never break any law. We use higher laws to supersede lesser laws. And how I have demonstrated that, and it's a little harder, is I take a piece of paper and I throw that paper and the paper just waffles around. Then I take a paper airplane, just with paper, and I fly it across the room. Now, what does that demonstrate? I used the law of aerodynamics to supersede the law of what that paper itself was doing. I didn't break any law, and no mystic or person or guru is ever breaking law. We are using different laws to supersede the laws that people use. Wait, this is going to take X amount of time to heal. No, you cannot leave your body. Yes, you can bilocate. You can do all of these things if it is in your realm of consciousness. And I noticed that you have a Yogananda book in your back and in your shelf there. And within his chapters, in one of the footnotes on page 30, he speaks of a man named Giuseppe Caligaris. Now, 99.999% of everyone I have ever met who's written that book doesn't know who Giuseppe Caligaris is. And then when I point it out, they go, "Oh my God, I never read this footnote. Why am I bringing him up?" He found a system on the body that is not the lymphatic or the circulatory or the acupuncture meridians. It is a system when points are activated, gives an individual super sensorial televisional powers where they can look 5 kilometers, 50 kilometers, 1,000 kilometers without leaving where they are. So I kind of threw that and segmented in there, but I wanted to give you something exciting and interesting. And it is sitting in the paperback book, Autobiography of a Yogi. So he recognized it, and with all its other teachings, he put that into his book so that other people would realize there's always more. There's always more to what we see and always more to what we experience. And if when we have these experiences, We look from our physical self, we may knee jerk and go, oh, okay. But as we look from that know thyself part, a part of us might say, wow, maybe I brought that upon myself because of what I did. And then another part will say, oh, there's a good lesson for me to learn.
Yeah, thank you. In tying that into Manly P. Hall, he wrote a book called The Pineal Gland, The Eye of God. And, Yeshua says when the eye is single, the whole body is full of light. Is that how you do remote viewing, you think?
There are numerous ways actually of doing remote viewing, because remote viewing, the end part of it is where you're going and what you're viewing. Now, how you get there can be accomplished in different ways. Of course, they teach classes and courses on how to do that. Now, I'm going to answer that question by saying this. If one believes you can only accomplish certain things physically by having a guru, going to Tibet and the Himalayas and spending 10 years, then guess what? After 10 years and going there, more than likely it'll happen. But the transcendentalists believed in cosmic consciousness by hugging trees. Hugging a tree. So that could be accomplished too. Whatever we believe in this reality, whatever we assume is going to be the guidepost, the only pathway to achieve something, so shall it be. But the way I look at it is that is not necessarily so. It is because it's based on the person who's teaching you and their experience that they have. Now, there is a book called the Yogi Aphorisms of Pantajali, which Pantajali was 1,000 years ago, which lists all of the different things that human beings are capable of. Get a guru, get a teacher. 45 years ago, when I first came across that, every single thing in that book I experienced within 48 hours. Now, I'm only sharing this not to say, oh, I'm great, but it was meant to show me what you believe is going to be your reality. But that's not necessarily so. You should look at the end result. Now, there's wonderful pictures of Plato and his student Aristotle. And there was a big division between these two philosophers. Aristotle's complaint with Plato was, you're giving us the end result, but you're not telling us how to get there. I want to know how to get there. And now I'm going to be a little silly, but I'm an Aquarian. I want to know how many miles it is. And what's a mile? It's feet. And what makes up a foot? Inches. And you go smaller and smaller and smaller. And two, you have our scientific world that you forgot the big picture. Plato was saying, there's the end result. I am not going to tell you the only way to get there. There are numerous ways to get there. Right now, maybe, what is it? Is it 8 billion people? Maybe there's 8 billion ways of getting there from where each of us is right now. What's the end result? The beautiful examples. Jesus, Buddha, we can go on and on. They exemplified a something for us to strive to. A Gandhi, who I dearly love. Those are the examples of there. Now, does that mean I have to do exactly what they did to get there? This is the misnomer people in the world feel. Steve Roth, I got to become a Buddhist now. I've got to, well, I was going to say shave my head, but it's already there. We think that is the only way to reach enlightenment is I'm in America. I did sports. I have muscles from running track. it wasn't so easy to get into the lotus position for me. And I remember killing myself 50 years ago and telling my sports buddies, oh my God, I can do a full lotus. And they didn't know. And they go, what is that? So I got myself in a position. I strained, everything was hurting. And I'll never forget my, my buddy Mike. He goes, oh, and he just did a full lotus instantly. He just he just did it instantly, having not ever done it before. So I've learned these lessons over time, our belief systems and what we think is important. But here's the bottom line: it's love, and that's why I produced a coin that I have on my website: a beautiful heart, an open mind, and a humble spirit, done with love, in love, and through love. That came to me in a dream. I don't know if we have time for me to relate the dream to you. Uh, the dream?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so about 16 years ago, I had a dream. I was walking along the ocean with all of the people seeking truth. They weren't following me. We were all together. And I noticed in the distance there was a woman dressed in blue holding a microphone, but she was covered in a fog and smoke. And when I got up to her, it was Sophia, the goddess of wisdom. Now, to my right and her left were horseshoe stands of all the people with the courses and the books and the authors and everything. And I thought to myself, not that they were not speaking truth, they were obliterating absolute wisdom with what they were saying. So I thought to myself, what are we supposed to do if these people are only giving us partial truth? And a big wind blew off the ocean. And I heard the angelic words: all one needs is a beautiful heart, an open mind, and a humble spirit to reach total illumination. And you do it with love, in love, and through love. So your audience and people, you don't have to read 20,000 books. The admonition is, can you operate with a beautiful heart, a heart seeing beauty, an open mind, just not reacting first, and humbly going through life? It was Paracelsus in 1510 who said, if you want to know what any herb or plant is going to do, sit humbly before it and just listen. And it will speak to you. Because within every human being is something called a foci, F-O-C-I. Every plant, every star in the cosmos that exists outside has a corresponding point inside. It's so beautiful. And again, you're talking the 1500s. This is as above, so below. This is the old admonition. As above, so below. We have all of that within us. It's a matter of being humble and asking, and everything will speak with you. My wife and I we have the book on animals and medicine cards, and all of a sudden a javelina appears, or a coyote, or you see a snake, or an eagle. Nature is talking to us all the time. So even though I've got a Ph.D. in finance and I've read all these things, guess what? I love the signs. I love seeing on the clock, and I yell across the house, Deborah, 222, 444, those repeating numbers. All universe is speaking to us all the time, if we want to listen. If we don't, no problem. But it's there.
Love that. You know, you brought up dreams, and I remember, do you remember when the Night Stalker was in LA? Richard Ramirez, he was that serial killer.
Yeah, was that in the 80s or 70s?
I believe it was in the 80s.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Well, I'm a little boy and I'm listening to this, the Night Stalker, and I'm scared. And during that time, I remember having a dream. And I had a dream of him telling me to go inside the sewer with him. He's telling me to come in, and it was really dark. You could see snakes, rats. It was just really filthy trash. And above it, there was a gate. So if I walked in, it'll shut. And then right after that, I had another dream. And because I came from the West, and my only conditioning was what the divine was relating to Jesus, I see a light and at the time, because I end up becoming, getting into gangs and stuff, living in the streets. But, and that's just my background. But I have all these active gang members. And at the time, a lot of people were getting shot and killed, and they're following me to this room. And when I walk into this room, there's three sides of the room had like plants and stuff. It was really green, really beautiful. On the other side, it was like really clouds and the sunlight, like of the spirit shining forth. And someone's talking to me in a robe. And automatically, because of my conditioning, I think it's Jesus, right? I don't know who it was. I couldn't see the face. But I just felt this presence, this divine presence. And I'm leading these people to this room. Now, I look back at my life now. I went through the darkness with Richard Ramirez. The darkness representing ignorance and my trauma and my conditioning and all that stuff. And then I had an awakening in 2009. And I woke up to the light, but I had to go through that. Without that mud, there's no lotus flower, right? Or Carl Jung would say, there's no coming to consciousness without pain. And I finally woke up, and it's like looking back at that with dreams, because you brought up dreams, it just really like brought a full circle for me, and just looking at my life, and I'm grateful for all that. I don't regret it anymore, because it all took.
It's making you who you are,
Yeah.
and again, I'm going to say you started with a zinger that was profound, and you're adding that again. Our dreams, our dreamer, our higher self, you came in to experience particular things which you have. And the question is, in our experiencing, what we do with it, what we eventually manifest within ourselves from these experiences. This is a schoolroom. And while I had to leave it to Beaver, that was the way it was supposed to be in this living for me now. That's not the case in all my past livings. You are experiencing something which has made you even stronger, because somebody goes and says, if they were to say to me, Steve, I lived a life on the streets. If for me to say, oh, I can relate to that, that's ridiculous. I cannot relate to that. I can only relate to my personal experiences and things I picked up through my dreams or visions, but there's no way I went through that. The people that you're reaching now, the people who you talk with, you're able to relate physical, emotional, spiritual experiences that you've had. Now, I counsel people in the health field, people going through spiritual challenges. I do it because I have a lot of guidance. You have guidance, but you also have the personal experience, which is very, very strong. So nobody will ever catch me saying, "Oh yeah, I know what you're, I know what you're feeling." Unless they said I went through a bad root canal, I'll go, "Okay, yeah, I can talk about that. I can talk about a bad root canal or a knee injury when it's at the top of my sports game." But I am not going to tell people. Otherwise, it makes me a hypocrite. And that's why when I look at some of these religious institutions, a priest who's never married giving marriage counseling, that's.
Yeah, our pastor's our greatest asset.
Yeah, exactly.
You brought up belief systems, and I had a quick question. What's your oldest book? Do you have any books on like the life review or the near-death experiences in ancient times?
Oh yeah. I have sections of books here. I don't know if people, if you're video and audio, because if you have people on audio and I'm sitting around going, hey, look at this, they're going, what the heck's he talking about? But they're a massive book. I will tell you what's coming to me, one of the most profound books. It's a small little book, and it's called The Kybalion, Kybalion, written by the three initiates. But I like that book and would recommend it because of its major principles. And from that book, you would be able to understand philosophies, religions, how the world works, why we think in this bipolar reality, why we think something's hot or cold. It's a very profound book from the early 1900s. I'm sure it's available on Amazon. I have it on my less complicated website. It's a good little book to have. Now, regarding your exact question about the ancients and what they reported, that's in all their writings. People like Pythagoras knew of his previous livings, and people like Proclus, which is another Greek philosopher, I believe 300 A.D., going all the way to Plotinus, Proclus, Porphyry, Iamblichus. They all knew about this. They knew about leaving the body. They knew about previous livings. In a lot of ways, and again, remember I said earlier, we have fast cars and computers. We know everything. No, we don't. These people were far wiser. And even Pythagoras, playing music for his disciples when they awoke. Why? Because he said there's that little voice when we wake up, got to do this, going to do this. Why do we? Hey, you and I still have that 2,500 years later. They knew those things, so they played music when you first awaken to get you into the day. And at the end of the day, music was played to put you in that environment of a restful sleep. But he also did something very interesting that I'd like to share, and that was Pythagoras. Before bedtime, he would do a review, his disciples, starting from right then all the way through what they did for the day, and if they could, the dreams they had the night before, and as far back as you can remember. Now, what is the purpose? Well, everything in our reality is moving forward. Boom, 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 boom. By interrupting this flow of time and consciousness that we're locked into, reversing it, a part of you goes, "Oh, wait a minute!" It's like, "Whoa, what's happening? Why are we doing this? Why are we going back and not? What am I going to do tomorrow and 3 weeks from now and 5 weeks?" You're not being in the present. You're jumping into the future instead of being in the present moment. And if you take your past into your present, that's going to be your future unless you live in the moment. Know thyself also means being in the still present, totally experiencing our present moment. That is how we reach greater enlightenment. Because if you are caught in this, nothing else is entering you except your brain, which is like an automatic pilot. But you have a mind. The brain is just a mechanism. And the subconscious is running. But when you allow your mind to come in here, your higher boo-boo, then you get input from a higher source and a higher viewpoint and greater wisdom.
Of that, I always think about the weighing of the heart in Egypt. I wonder if that's a life review in ancient times, trying to explain the life review that present people talk about.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, uh, there was a great movie. It was about an individual. A comedian who died and it may be called Defending Your Life or whatever. And he's died. And Meryl Streep is in that movie. And it's depicting how a life review takes place and when you passed away. I'm not going to say heaven yet because it was like an intermediary zone where you don't go to hell, but it's like you got to go back. You didn't do things to the highest, so it's not a punishment. The our own higher self says, I'd like to do this better than I did before. But I believe it's like defending your life. It is a great comedy, but there may be a little bit more to it because you brought up it's a review, an honest review of your life and why you did the things that you did.
Love that. I had something that just came to mind about the emerald tablets. That's popular today.
Yes.
But then there's an emerald tablet, but there's emerald tablets, but is the emerald tablets, are they fake that Doriel put together? Because um it sounds like King James kind of verbiage, that was formed in the early 1900s.
And I would say that you are quite possibly right.
Hmm.
So again, we can only do comparisons based on our knowledge, our wisdom at the time, and that is no different than when I meet mediums. And believe me, I believe very strongly in the spirit world, and I like spiritual communication. But when spirits come through claiming that they are the Countess Saint Germain or Plato or Jesus, I sit there and go, wow, wait a minute. This person was more profound in the living than they appear to be in spirit, and their philosophy is a lot more open and here in reality than coming through spirit. We have to look and take things with a grain of salt. And this is where each person must trust their own intuition. Does this feel right? Does it pass the smell test? And would it be good in all situations? That is the difference between relative and absolute. Relative, it just works because, well, this is how it is in my situation. But does it hold water in other situations? In every situation? That's the difference between relative and absolute. And when you read, somebody who would be reading what you just said for the first time might go, wow. And they're right. For them, it's very profound. But if somebody has access to a lot of different things from that time period and earlier, we might say, well, that doesn't really hold water in the greater perspective. I believe everything is true. Why? Because it exists. By the mere reason things exist, they're here. And if somebody wants to relate to it, that's somebody's choice. But as people go into higher states, knowing thyself, wanting to reach more and more absolute, if any of us can really ever reach total absolute truth, that remains to be seen. We have examples of people who demonstrated total love. But in the Bible, did not even Jesus lose his temper in the temple and throwing? Well, there's reasons for why that was put in there at that time when everything else is of the highest standpoint and love. Why was he so upset? So we strive to emulate certain people, but I would again say strive to be the best person you can. And how do you do that? by looking at examples that have been put on this planet Earth, going back tens of thousands of years up to and through Jesus and the Buddha, and for people Muhammad and Gandhi and if whomever. I mean, it's all relative to who somebody relates to, but you take the high positions that these individuals took, but remember that every one of them you're going to find a human part. You're going to find a clay toe. I don't want to say clay foot because that's like all the toes, but there may be a clay toe in there.
One thing I want to ask you, which is a huge part, and I'm switching topics, but it's a huge part of your experience, and he was a beautiful mind and soul, is Royal Rife.
Yes.
And before I get into that, I would love to ask a question. Why haven't we cured cancer? And I love how you talked about this 1939 dinner party in Pasadena that it happened.
But I'm going to tell you something interesting. We'll get into that. I just did a little blurb on the picture showing, it was actually 1931, a dinner party talking about, and if I say the same words on your show, this lady couldn't post it on YouTube 3 days ago because YouTube said it was against their thing, intimating that problems could be rectified in health.
Oh.
Now, that is very bizarre that they would say, wait a minute, no, don't give the impression. We had Royal Rife, who developed the super microscope in the 1920s, early 1930s. The microscope 10 times more powerful than any other light source microscope. When they looked at any virus, microbe, or bacteria, it would glow in its own unique color. That happened because he had counter-rotating prisms that when the light source came from the bottom through these counter-rotating prisms would illuminate the specimen that was there under the microscope. Cancer was always a ruby red and tuberculosis was an emerald green. So the microbacterial virus glowed in a color for 60 different health problems. Now, once we have a color, we have a rate of vibration. That's what makes the color. Now, I want you to imagine a man or woman who sings and their voice will break a glass because the resonant frequency of that glass matched their voice and it shattered. So now we have colors for 60 viruses, bacteria, microbes. They went for cancer into the red spectrum with a frequency generator, went through the red dial, and when it hit that ruby red color, the color disappeared and that virus was instantly destroyed. Instantly destroyed, just like the glass would shatter when the voice hit the right frequency. They found the frequency for 60 diseases and illnesses. There was a dinner party of this great development in microscopy and also in the answer for a lot of health challenges. Now, why is cancer still here? We declare a war on cancer. Nixon in 1970, we're going to put billions in. 50 years later, what does virtually every single person die? Movie stars, regular people, they die of cancer. But we're going to find the answer. We're so close. Just give us more money. We got the answer. There are many different causes of that difficulty. It's not just one. It could be the environment. It could be toxic system. It could be electricity and frequency in the house. It comes from your thoughts. It comes from your food. So there's a multitude. Then we have so many different people. Trust me, within our library, there are half a dozen top reputable people throughout history that rectified that health challenge. But it's the biggest business. It's the biggest business on the planet. So I'm giving you a short answer to make sure your podcast makes it. But this just happened 3 days ago because I uttered the certain sequence of words. Crazy.
Thank you for that. I'm not really into sides in politics or anything. I just care about people as a whole. And there's a saying, "Make America healthy again." And I always say, well, we first got to learn how to love ourselves and each other, or you're defeating the purpose. You can try to fix the water, what's in the cereal, or whatever, but if we don't learn how to love ourselves and others, we're missing the golden rule.
You didn't need me on this show. You just needed me as a space filler from the first thing you said, the middle thing, and just now. That's the bottom line. The bottom line is love. Love is the highest vibration. Love can rectify all things. It's love that allows a woman's husband or spouse or partner is repairing his car. The jack teeters, the car falls, and a woman lifts an ungodly amount, 1,500 pounds up, and picks her husband. I read that in an article. She held up one thing and pulled her husband out. Now, people will say, well, of course, you got the juices flowing. No, it's love. Her love for her person, the child, supersedes what any normal thing can happen. And in our lives, that people will recognize how powerful love is. And when we love, for me, I don't believe Jesus had any patience at all. He didn't need patience. He had so much love. That's what matters. The Buddha, looking over the fence with a privileged life and seeing poor and going out and going, wow, what am I doing? Encapsulated here and seeing the suffering of people. It's love. So your audience is lucky they have you.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I'm going to ask you one more quick question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
What's your understanding of what people call God?
Yes. Well, why did you wait for that question to be at the end? For me, my conception is it is a universal energy that encompasses everything, all times. It is a vibrational frequency that is the glue that holds everything together, the totality of love. We have physical objects and planets, and as those satellites go or missiles go further out, they discover it's endless. There's trillions of galaxies with billions and billions of planets. It's endless. So when I have spoken and asked spiritual sources, that is spirits coming through either myself or other entities, what is your conception of God? So I'm going to throw it on them, if you don't mind, Boo Boo. I'll say, what is it? They go, from our perspective, it is endless. It is so vast that even we in spirit, who see multi-dimensions and far more than you. So I said, okay, how can you define it for me? They will always answer the same way. Think of it as light. Think of it as a more brilliant and brilliant and brilliant light as you get closer to the source. And it was Pythagoras that said, the body of God is light. The spirit of love is truth, absolute truth. So I would just say it is a brighter and brighter light. Now, that may be a cop-out, but remember, how can this little head take in all of that?
Steve, I appreciate you coming on. And I'm going to end it with the Manly P. Hall quote.
Yes.
And he says, "To live in a world without becoming aware of the meaning of the world is like wandering about in a great library without touching the books."
Wow. Thank you. That is beautiful and so apropos for my environment here. So, and I totally enjoy being with you. And I told you before we started taping, I'll say it again. I never take these interviews and podcasts lightly. I appreciate you allowed me to share my experience with you, with your listeners. And thanks again very much.
Thank you, and you're a treasure for humanity. Thank you, my friend, and namastizzle.
Thank you. Bye now.
Just know we out here. Know we out here working in a major way. Had to speak on it just to make a break. Any given subject, know we make a way. Time to level up on a day-to-day. Know we out here working for the greater good. Expand your mind, broaden your lens the way you should. From the stars to the galaxy to speak on spirituality. Higher understanding for the neighborhood.